Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inlay Terms. I am your host, Peyman Askari. This is episode 260. We are airing on Friday, March 20th. Before introducing the guest, a big thank you to loyal viewer Alice, who was gracious enough to create that intro video for me. So, Alice, thank you very much. Our guest today is Mr. Tony Ledsham. Tony, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm glad you could make time, and I watched your interview with Leighton Gray, another great interviewer, and you and I have been talking offline. So I'm really glad that you agreed to come on short notice, sir. Thank you.
Oh, it's my
Uh,
pleasure.
I guess that to get started, we're going to get to your case, and it's your typical, judicial overreach case. But before that, if you could tell the audience a little about yourself and your military history in Canada.
Yeah, so I grew up in a suburb of Toronto called Scarberia, um, better known as Scarborough. Middle class upbringing. I had two cops that lived on my street. I had huge respect for them. They used to go to work with a white shirt and a black tie and their forage cap on. And now we see the cops wearing all black, muscles, tattoos. They look like thugs now. So um, big change over my 66 years of life. But anyway, I joined the Air Force. I was a fighter pilot. I had multiple tours in combat, and the last combat experience I had was in Kosovo, which is a province of Serbia. And I got shot at, and I dropped bombs, and I killed people, and it took me 15 years to figure out that I'd been lied to. We were not defending the people of Kosovo. We were actually trying to coerce Serbia.
I think I know possibly if Tony's on his phone, somebody might have tried to call him. We'll get him back. Either that or the Air Force didn't like what he had to say. For anybody who's aware, I'm getting a notification from Substack telling me
Okay,
that.
sorry
Are you
about that.
back? Did you get a phone call?
So anyway, yeah, I found out that we weren't protecting the people of Kosovo. We were actually trying to coerce Serbia into joining NATO, and this has been an ongoing history, and that led us into the campaign in Ukraine, of course. So this was the first thing that told me not to trust the government implicitly. Anyway, I joined the Air Force. Had a great career as a fighter pilot. Went all over the place. Did all kinds of things, and had a really good time. After 20 years, it was time to get out, so I joined Air Canada. A year after I joined, 9/11 hit, and I knew that my career had just changed incredibly. So a couple of years later, I ended up being on the furlough list, the surplus list. I got another job. I came back to Air Canada. I saw some things that I didn't like about what was going on, so I got involved in union work, and I rose to the top of the union. I was on the master elected council, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try and sort some things out because I'd seen so much, over the previous probably 12 years that I knew what needed to be fixed on the union side. And then I was working with the top lawyer in the union, and I realized he was corrupt. So I went to the rest of the master elected council, and these are 11 pilots that make up this board of directors. And I said, hey, listen, I'm pretty sure this guy is corrupt. And they all looked at me like, oh, you're not part of this? So I was the only guy that was an outlier in this. I didn't know that this corruption was so ingrained into the union. And, you and I talked about the other Air Canada employee that basically led me to you, and that's Sue Spruill. And she talks about the union corruption and the corruption in Air Canada as well. So that really sort of tied my story together with you, and then of course we both have a background with the People's Party of Canada. So yeah, so
Tony,
that got me going. Yeah.
sorry, going back to what you said. First of all, I didn't know about your views on Kosovo. That's fascinating. Maybe we could get to that near the end. But you mentioned you recognized that the attorney was corrupt. How did you figure that out?
So because I was on the master elected council, I had a certain amount of power to do things. So we started up a study of the pension fund, because it was the incredible deficit in the pension fund that dragged us into bankruptcy at Air Canada in 2000 and I think it was 2004. So I was also on the negotiating committee a few years later in 2012, and I got very smart on the pension plan and how the funding works and all that kind of stuff. So I started to figure out that there were some abnormalities with the pension plan. And I was able to get a very good pension lawyer and a very good actuary who I'd worked with on the negotiating committee. So they were working with me as a team. And all of a sudden, my funding got cut off. And then I was instructed not to even try to contact them. And I went, hang on a second here. So this was an obvious attempt to shut me down. Yeah. And I mean, we had been absolutely battered because of the pension plan. So we cooperated with the company. We didn't want to see the company fail over the pension deficit. But I mean, 2 years later, the pension surplus was so big that the company was not even allowed to contribute funds, because it's like an RRSP. When you contribute funds to the pension plan, you can write it off on income tax, right? So they weren't even allowed to do that. So they made zero contributions to our pension plan, and we were still obliged to make contributions. So, I figured it out pretty quick that there was something fishy going on. And I was actually getting to the point where I almost had it figured out, and then they pulled the rug out from under my feet and cut off my funding and said, "You're not allowed to contact these guys." So it's like, okay, you, Brad Ridge, the senior lawyer at the Air Canada Pilots Association, you're corrupt. Yeah.
But oh, we lost you again. He'll be back.
I'm
There
back.
we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, but what exactly? What was the illegality? Or were they stealing money from the pension fund?
No, no, and this is, it's actually quite complex, and it's legal, but it's not moral. So I'll try and be brief here. But what happened was they had been managing the pension plan in-house, and the guy that had done it had done a really good job. He'd set this up so that it was insulated from interest risk, and that's a big thing with pension plans. You have to invest them in very safe investments, but they are subject to interest rates. So when the interest rates go up, it really hurts the assets in the pension plans because they're inverse. So as the interest rates go up, then the asset value goes down, and they have to keep the asset value to a certain level. So he had done a very complex program, and then he left for greener pastures, and they developed an in-house um, subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary of Air Canada, which managed the pension plan. Because we're talking $20 billion, so this is a lot of money here. So they were managing this in-house, and I found out that they were paying this company $40 million a year out of our pension plans to manage the pension fund, which was basically on autopilot at this point. So when I asked the lawyer and the chair of the pension committee about this, they just froze up. They stopped talking to me. So it was legal, but and the other thing was we had to pay, as part of the concessions for bankruptcy, we had to pay extra money into the.
I think someone's calling in. That's what's happening. Gives me time to collect my thoughts. Uh, as I was mentioning, if anybody's watching on Substack, I am aware that it's down. It's hard to fix these things in real time, and I can't afford a producer. I wish that things could be worse. At least it's not me that's having the internet data connection problems. Any questions in the audience? Anything? Somebody throw me a lifeline. Doot, 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 doot. Anybody watching Erod? Erod's on fire. great idea. Let Israel escalate things, and the Gulf states are paying the price. Hey, Tony.
Oh man, sorry. My wife is trying to get a hold of me, and every time she calls me, it kicks me off.
Yeah, I
The
figured. I figured we'll power through it. It's fine.
yeah.
We were talking about. I'm sure she's a lovely, lovely woman, and she doesn't know that we're doing a live stream. Uh, we were talking about the $40 million, and I remember I watched your interview with Leighton Gray. That $40 million, given that it's a subsidiary of Air Canada, it's like a transfer from your pensions to Air Canada.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they still have their website up. It's called TransCanada Capital, and there's like 8 people that work there, and I'm sure they work part time because, like I said, the previous guy had set up the pension plan basically to work on autopilot. So yeah, this is it's basically money laundering. Yeah.
And then, so how
But
did
it's
they?
legal money laundering. They're allowed to do this.
Yeah, I see what you mean now that it's unethical. But how did they manage to? Okay, let's actually before that, you mentioned that you figured out the lawyer was corrupt. You went to the other people, and they're like, "Yeah, what's the point?" Were they getting a cut out of this?
Well, and this is the thing. It doesn't take much to corrupt people, okay? And it may not even be money, but our industry, especially as pilots, it's so highly regulated. So if you get caught doing something wrong, whether it's a high blood alcohol content, and for blood alcohol, we're talking about 0.02, we're not talking 0.08. So, it could be that, or you could be found messing with a flight attendant when you're married. So there's all kinds of, and there's all kinds of ways to coerce people into corruption. So
Okay,
probably not money. No. No.
and these other members on the I can't remember what you called it the Master High Council or whatever.
Yeah, Master Elected Council. Yeah, MEC.
Master Elected Council, were they all pilots?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we got another incoming phone call. Doo, 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 doo. Whenever this happens to me, when I'm the one being interviewed, I have like a nervous breakdown. I gotta take the rest of the day off. I'm so distraught. Doo, doo, doo. I mean, I could walk him through putting it in airplane mode. Hey, you're
Ah,
back.
I just told her not to call me back, so hopefully we won't get interrupted. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
So
If it
yeah,
happens,
yeah,
that's fine. Um,
yeah.
so they're mostly pilots on the Master Elected Council. What is the
Yeah.
purpose of the Master Elected Council?
Well, it's just like a board of directors, so it's the oversight of the operation, and it's supposed to be there to ensure governance, to make sure that the money is being spent properly. Because I mean, they had a lot of money too. I mean, the union had like $40 million in their contingency fund, so they have a lot of power. And this will come out when we get to the arbitrator. I'm pretty sure that he was paid a lot of money to have me kicked out of the union.
And what happened? What happened when you did when you brought it to their attention? You said they kind of did something. Did they remove you? What happened exactly?
Yeah, so it started out with a workplace harassment complaint um, against the senior lawyer, or by the senior lawyer against me. And that was kind of inconclusive. I was not able to get a copy of the final report. And then they took it to an official arbitrator who was appointed by the Ministry of the Attorney General in Ontario. So now he is what they call quasi judicial official. So he is almost a judge. And this was back during the pandemic, so everything was on Zoom. And when I started arguing, he would just mute me, and then he would let the other side argue as long as they wanted. And then when I started to counter their arguments, he would just mute me, So I said, okay, well, you're obviously corrupt as well. And then years later, so I was kicked out. There were pretty onerous conditions put on me. I only had a single email address that I was able to contact the union with. I wasn't allowed to visit the headquarters or any of that kind of stuff in person, or contact anybody else in the union. And so I contacted him and I said, hey, listen, the other side is not complying with your directives. and he refused to reply to me. And then I just kept sending him emails, and I would leave him voicemails, and he wouldn't respond. And then eventually he filed a criminal harassment complaint against me, and I was arrested by the police for
Okay. I'm sorry, but we got to go all the way back. So
that.
the Air Canada pension is, does that belongs? I know it belongs to the employees, but that's under Air Canada.
Correct. So they are the administrators of the pension. Yeah.
And the elected high elected whatever council, that's a part of the union or Air Canada.
Yeah. No. That's part of the union. Yeah.
Okay, and the lawyer that you had an issue with, was that part of the union or Air Canada?
No, but they're all part of the union. Yeah.
And when he filed a workplace harassment complaint, did he file it with Air Canada or the government of Canada? I lost track there.
No, it's through the Ontario Labor Relations Board.
Okay, so the Ontario provincial government,
Yeah.
and that's why it went through that quasi judicial thing. You said it was almost a judge.
No, that was the next level up. So that one was inconclusive. I never got the report from the workplace harassment complaint, but then the union bumped it up to the next level, and they engaged this arbitrator named Matthew Wilson, and he was the guy that ruled against me and had me kicked out. And then when I tried to communicate with him, he filed the criminal harassment complaint several years later, and that's when I got arrested.
What is the prime responsibility of a union? Would that be to the lawyer to protect the lawyer's rights or to protect your rights?
No, absolutely not. So the whole idea of the union is to represent the membership. So the lawyer was a staff member, and he was subordinate to me. So the people on the master elected council are like the board of directors for a company, and they are they have the overriding and the overarching power over all of the employees. So it was
I had like an existential crisis when I'm wondering, like, is there a union for the union? Like, what do you do on the board of the union? Did the union have to be impartial in that case with you and the lawyer?
well, they're supposed to be, yeah, but when they're all corrupt, it's obvious that they're going to be totally biased against me. Yeah.
And what was the nature of the workplace harassment? Like, did you chase the guy around with a baseball bat? Did you use
No,
like
no,
the
no,
F
no.
word?
No. This is, and it gets back to the criminal harassment complaint. So when you start contacting people and they don't reply to you, and you contact them persistently, that's allowed to be called harassment. But to be harassment, it has to be unauthorized. All right. So if and really, like, criminal harassment was really, it used to be called stalking, and it was really for romantic relationships, where people were sitting outside their ex-spouse's house in their car, and you know phoning them at 3 o'clock in the morning and that kind of stuff. So it's got a legitimate purpose, but it's not designed for lawyers to you know get people thrown in prison for no reason.
So this guy, the first round it goes nowhere. The second round it goes that quasi judicial body, and then it gets escalated to criminal harassment, and you get
Yeah.
arrested.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's insane.
Oh, it's absolutely insane. Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
But
then what
it
happens
gets
after that?
worse. It gets worse.
Yeah.
So they tried to arrest me in August of 2023. And this is all happening out in Oshawa. So this is called Durham Region, which is east of Toronto, and I live west of Toronto. So they contacted my local police force, which is the Halton Region Police Force, and they asked them to have me arrested in August of 2023. And the Halton police said, "Well, no, we're not going to do it without a warrant. You have to have a warrant." So that went to about November of 2023. And then the cops from Oshawa called me up again, and they said, "Okay, you're wanted for arrest. If you're driving your car and you get pulled over, they're going to arrest you, and your car is going to be impounded, and you're going to be taken to a police station, all this kind of stuff. So it's to your own interest to, surrender for arrest." So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." So he said, "Okay, we'll come out to Oshawa, and we'll process the arrest out here." And I said, "Well, are we going to talk about this like adults first before you arrest me? or are you just going to arrest me and then I can talk later? And he goes, no, I'm going to arrest you and then we'll talk later. So I said, no, I'm not going to drive out to Oshawa and have you arrest me under those conditions. So they contacted the local police again, the Halton police, and they convinced them to come and arrest me. And so I was arrested at my house, and they released me immediately. So it was not a big deal. Well, I subsequently found out that they didn't even have a warrant for the second arrest either. So they're playing very, very loose with the rules here. And this was obviously just an attempt to shut me up. They just wanted to lay the pressure on so badly that I would just back off and go away.
Okay. For the audience, in what circumstance is it okay to arrest someone without a warrant?
Yeah, so the grounds are pretty high. They can do it obviously if the police witnesses um, an illegal act, if he sees you pointing a gun or breaking into somewhere. But if they don't have direct proof, then they have to have very, very good grounds for arrest. So they didn't have it in this point. And I think that the Durham police out in Oshawa never even got a warrant for my arrest because the justice of the peace said, no, you don't have grounds for arrest. So they convinced the Halton police to go and arrest me anyway.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Is there any
So
way you can prove that? I'm assuming the justice system's opaque.
no, it's so the one thing is that there is still some saving grace in the justice system. And when you get arrested on a criminal case, you are um, you have the right to see all of the disclosure. So this is all of the evidence that they have against you, and you have the right to see that. So I got the disclosure, and the first 5 pages were almost completely redacted. So I said, well, why are you redacting a page like this? It looks, I mean, even stuff on the index page was redacted. And the Crown prosecutor at the time, she goes, well, like we can redact this, we can redact that. And I said, well, is it the police contention that I admitted guilt? Because one of the pages was uh, guilty plea report. And she said, oh, no, no, no. So she obviously knew right away that that's what happened. And then she just lied about it. So it took me 5 months, but I got the partially redacted pages. And then it was obvious that it was bullshit because, I would get a page that was completely black and the only headline at the top was the guilty plea report. And then when I got the unredacted portion, all it had on it was my name. It didn't have any details about what it was about. So it was obvious that they had made up this whole story that I had, you know, admitted my guilt to the cops, and I'd basically surrendered to the cops, and they had arrested me under those grounds.
Okay, let's take that one step at a time. The guilty plea report, is this what is that?
Well, it's, they tried to explain it to me that that's a standard form that they put in, and it's either he pled guilty or he's contesting this. But there was nothing on it. All I had on it was my name. So it's obvious that that was, like if it had a said, Anthony Ledsham did not admit guilt, then that would have been fine. But it didn't even say that. So the Crown attorneys, and they're the ones that do the redactions, they are very sloppy and they're not the smartest lawyers. I know a lot of lawyers, and these people are not very sharp, believe me. And I don't know if you've been following Tamara Litch, but the things that she's been through with the Crown attorneys, it's just brutal.
But what did they redact? Did they just redact blank lines or what?
Well, that's the thing. Like, why would they redact a whole page when the only thing on the page was my name? So obviously there was something there, and then they went, "Uh-oh, we can't let that get out. So now we're going to have to construct something," and that's obstructing justice.
That just seems like fraud.
Well, it's obstructing justice. I mean, obstructing justice is a serious criminal offense, especially by a Crown attorney.
My lord, man! I was hoping to have like a casual Friday, one day without stress. Um, let's go back to so criminal harassment. The judge Did the judge petition this? No, not the judge. The attorney petition the law enforcement there in Oshawa, saying this guy's harassing me criminally. Go arrest him. Or was
Well,
there a
that's
crown
the other.
prosecutor?
No, that there's the other interesting thing. So we still haven't got to the criminal trial yet, but we've done what's called a charter voir dire. So this is where it's like a trial within a trial, but you just focus on the Charter of Rights violations that happen, and there are many, many, believe me. So I had the opportunity to cross-examine this guy, and but I also, um, sorry, what was your specific question again? I got off on a tangent there, but
How did it go from some lawyer complaining that you were harassing them to the police saying we want this guy
well,
arrested for criminal
eh,
harassment? Was there a prosecutor in the middle there?
no, so that's the other thing. And Ontario, about half the provinces in Ontario, the police have to consult a crown prosecutor before they press charges because they know that there's so much emotion involved in this. Because as I said, it's really designed for romantic relationships, right? And then it's he said, she said type of thing. But the other interesting thing was um, the staff sergeant who's in charge of the criminal investigation branch. So these are the people that process the arrest, seek a warrant from a justice of the peace. So I got to cross-examine him, and I'd done about 2 sessions of that, and then I'm outside in the ante room waiting, and the Crown prosecutor comes up to me and he says, "Okay, the sergeant, his name was Rayner, he's got a statement to make to the court." And I said, "Okay, well, what's it all about?" And he goes, "Well, you'll find out when you go in." I'm going, "What the heck?" Like I was worried. I thought he'd got some kind of incriminating evidence. So he gets up and he says, "Your Honor, I failed to disclose the fact that I played hockey with the complainant, Mr. Wilson. We were on the same hockey team, and he did approach me about this case with Mr.
Oh,
Ledsham."
come on.
No, seriously, and I'm looking at the judge like, okay, this is done. This is dismissal of the case, and the judge just goes, "No, no, we'll hear the rest of it." So they had a personal relationship. This guy had approached him in the changing room and said, "Hey, listen, I got this guy that's really bugging me. He's accusing me of fraud and all this kind of stuff. What can I do to get him off my back?" And the sergeant obviously said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll do our best to get rid of this guy."
Just for so you don't get sued. That's you're speculating, right?
Speculating on what?
You don't have evidence that that happened, but that's probably what happened.
Well, yeah. So let's put it this way: if he does sue me for defamation, I have enough evidence to say that that is obvious what happened. All right. So was I in the changing room when he said that? No, but he admitted that he had been approached by Mr. Wilson about my case. So how it specifically happened, I don't know, but it's obvious that it happened. And it was totally and completely inappropriate. So here's the other thing. He works for one division of the Durham Region Police Service. Well, there's 4 different divisions that all have their own criminal investigation branch. So when he got the case on his desk, he should have said, "No, I'm conflicted. We'll send it to the Central Division." But he kept it in his division. So it was obvious. I mean, there's no other explanation for it than it was corruption. Yeah.
Did you did you lose your temper with the judge? If I was there, I'd be like, "Judge, like what the hell is this? Like send this guy's ass to jail. Like do we have any remedy at all?"
No, you can't lose your temper with a judge. You got to be really careful about that because that's contempt of court. So,
So, but like what was the judge even aware that this I would call this corruption.
oh,
Like you
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was aware, but he didn't want to do anything about it.
yeah, but like did he at least say Mr. Ledsham, I agree with you, but my hands are tied. I can't like did he at least do something like that?
No, no, no. They're very, very good at deflecting these things. So he had been a crown prosecutor for probably 15 years before he became a judge. So he's heard all of these kind of arguments and he knows how to just deflect them. And that's all they do. They just deflect it. They just say, "Nope, we're moving on. And it's like, "Well, with respect, Your Honor, we haven't resolved this issue yet." And he goes, "Nope, we're moving on. And it's like, okay, you can't argue anymore.
I go back to my previous question. Do you have any recourse? Like can you appeal the to a
Oh
Supreme
yeah.
Court or
Oh yeah, yeah. But so this is in the Ontario Court of Justice, and then the next level of appeal is the Superior Court of Justice. And I've already been to the Superior Court for a couple of interim decisions, and a conviction. Actually, I was convicted in the Ontario court, so I appealed it in the Superior Court, and they were just as bad. And these judges in the Superior Court, they make $400,000 a year. So I thought, okay, they're going to be a little sharper than the OCJ judges, but yeah. But so then you go to the Court of Appeal, which is above the Superior Court.
And is that sorry? Is that where the story ends, or did I interrupt you and you got more to go?
No, I think I've explained it enough. Unless you get any questions about that. So basically, I'm stuck with two criminal convictions, and they are with failure to comply with a release order. So they said I contacted people I wasn't supposed to contact, and they had, I mean, it wasn't even circumstantial evidence they had. It was absolutely weak. So it's obvious that I've been labeled, and they have to find me guilty no matter what.
Reminds me of the story of James Stewart. They beat the crap out of him in a parking lot, and then it went to trial. And the cops are like, "Well, most of the cameras weren't working, and this only one
Yeah.
we have has no microphone."
Yeah, yeah. No, that happened to a friend of mine too. He got beat up by the cops for no reason, you know, and they charged him with assault. So he goes to the trial and he goes, "Well, did the cops have any injuries on them?" Because he had broken ribs and all kinds of stuff. He was really, really messed up, and the cops had no injuries. So the judge threw it out, but he didn't uh, find anything against the cops. He just said, "Yeah, okay, you're not guilty." That's not justice.
Alice not woke. She came in a little bit late. The conviction or the charge was criminal harassment. So he emailed the lawyer, I guess, too many times.
Yeah, emailed, called. Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
so here's another funny one. So, um, when they weren't happy with the result of so I'm talking about Matthew Wilson, the arbitrator, when they weren't happy about the result of that, then the union went back and they had it endorsed at the Superior Court of Justice in Toronto. So I had to go to the hearing for that. And so I summoned him as a witness. So you have to serve, the summons. It's a subpoena, actually. So you have to serve the subpoena to the person, in person, right? So I found his address, his business address online, and I went out to Oshawa, and it's a post office box inside a Shoppers Drug Mart. So I go, okay, well, I'll send it via registered mail, and at least he's going to get it. And then I was doing a internet search, and I found his physical business address. So I went out there, and it's a house in Oshawa. So I thought, okay, well, he's got a home office, right? That makes sense. So I knocked on the door. There was no answer. So I just left it at the door. Well, he reported this to the cops that I was stalking him, and that I was out visiting his house, right? And then when we got into court, he said, "Well, I'm not on social media. I don't know how you found my home address." And I said, "No, you are on social media. It's called Zoom Info, and your business is advertised on Zoom Info at this address." And he tried to say, "Oh, well, that wasn't me that put it there. Somebody must have scraped old data and put it on there." But they,
it's like they're playing games. Like they're trying to
oh,
hit you with criminal harassment. You're doing your job, serving them. They're like, "Oh, he's criminally harassing me again."
yeah, 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 yeah. And I mean, it's so sad that the courts don't take this seriously because in the end, the Crown has to prove beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, so there can be no doubt about anything. So it has to be really, really solid in order to convict somebody, right? Well, I mean, there's huge doubts everywhere. There's so many holes in their case. It was just unbelievable. And I'm still dealing with this.
Let's move on to intent. Why do you think they do this? Do you think it's the culture where the attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges, law enforcement, they rub shoulders all the time and they're like, well, Tony's an outsider?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, because this guy was a quasi judicial official of the court, he would have known a bunch of people in the court because he lived in the area and he would have been in and out of court, with various cases and that kind of stuff. So I actually applied for what's called a change of venue to get out of Oshawa, and the judge refused to grant that.
What
So
was the reason?
it's a big boys club, and if you're attacking one of their little club, then they're going to try and squeeze you out. And the other thing is, I think I was telling you, I use I've used lawyers for many, many years. My son's a lawyer, and I was involved with him in the military and, through divorce and all that kind of stuff. So I don't have anything against lawyers, but I've now found that using I can get as good, if not better, results using AI. So I've probably saved $100,000 in legal fees just by doing it myself.
Yeah, the fees are insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they know that, they know that, and they keep pressuring me. They keep saying, well, if you're represented by a lawyer, you probably wouldn't have all these problems. And I said, no, I'm actually pretty legally savvy. Thank you very much for your advice, Your Honor.
Why did the judge deny your request for a change of venue?
Well, that's the other thing. They should provide solid reasons. And what really happens in court is they just say, no, your request is unreasonable. It's denied. So you say, well, how do you classify unreasonable, Your Honor? I gave you solid reasons for it. And he goes, no. And it's just that easy. They just wave their hand and move on to something else. Yeah.
Have you thought about, like, if you were if you were king for a day, how would you reform the judiciary, the judicial system, so this doesn't happen as often?
Well, that's really tough. I mean, down in the States, the higher level judges are actually voted in, and the well, not the crown prosecutors, but they're state prosecutors. They're actually voted in. Now, whether that would actually change anything, I don't know. But the big thing is that there's really no oversight of these judges. So I filed complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council and the Ontario Judicial Council, and they just say, no, we don't see anything there. We're not even going to investigate it. And it's the same with the law societies. I've filed so many complaints against lawyers with the Law Society of Ontario, and they won't even investigate it. They'll just say, no, there are not sufficient grounds for us to investigate it. And here's a little factoid. So you can go on to the Law Society of Ontario website and find out how many complaints are lodged and how many resolutions come out. So they typically get, and this is constant over about the last 4 years, they get about 4,000 complaints a year against lawyers and paralegals. And only about 120 of those go to resolution. So the rest of them are just swept under the carpet.
Jeez.
And
Yeah,
this is
it's
on
really,
their website, like I'm not making this up.
it's super frustrating because, especially with what's happened the last 6 years. So,
Yeah.
these unions and the colleges that are, well, the unions specifically, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Like in your case, your union
Absolutely.
went after you.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's so much money involved, it's staggering. And because I was on the so here's another interesting story. So I'm cross-examining Matthew Wilson. He's this arbitrator that filed a complaint against me. And the judge calls me in and he goes, okay, what's going to be your line of questioning? Well, first of all, that is inappropriate. Okay. So if I ask an inappropriate question at the time, then he can stop me, but he shouldn't be canvassing me ahead of time to find out what the questions were. But I didn't, I didn't realize that at the time. So I said, well, I'm going to ask him who paid him, because obviously if he's paid by one of the parties, he's going to be in a conflict of interest. The judge goes, no, no, you can't ask him that. I said, well, why not? Goes, no, no, you're not going to ask him that. This is a judge's directive. You will not ask him that question. So we get into cross-examination. And I said, Mr. Wilson, you were appointed by the Ministry of the Attorney General. Is that correct? And he goes, yes, that's correct. I said, were you compensated by the Ministry of the Attorney General? And the crown leapt out of his seat and the judge was on my case. He goes, no, you are not to ask him about compensation. Well, why would they do that? Because they know that that would be a conflict of interest, right? Because I was on the Master Elected Council. I know that he got paid by the Air Canada Pilots Association, but the judge wouldn't let me ask that question. It's that bad. I mean, it's just astounding. I keep looking at this going, how can you be so blatant about this?
Like, okay, first of all, like, as you mentioned, like under common law, you should be allowed to ask a question, and then if it's inappropriate, then the judge can. It's not
Yeah.
even the judge; it's the prosecutor has to object.
Well,
Correct?
that's the other thing. The judge, so there's this expression, and it goes, the judge must not enter the arena. So the judge is not in there to be elbows up fighting. He's supposed to be the referee sitting up on the bench, you know, calling what's inappropriate or not. But all of these judges, not just him, but all of these judges, they would get in there and they'd be right in my face arguing about the validity of my arguments and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you can't do that.
Are you familiar? Isn't there a body that in Canada that oversees the judges? I think it's called the Judicial Council.
Yeah, oh yeah, I've filed complaints with them. Yeah, it's like I was saying, they, they're like the Law Society of Ontario. They're there to protect the judges, not the public.
Trevor Hallsworth, I've interviewed him. He's gone into detail with this, and he says that it's basically it's like a rubber stamp. They never punish the judges.
No, no, no. Oh, it's brutal. Yeah.
So where I'm going with this, Tony, is that they're running roughshod. Like this is not a citizen judiciary. It's almost like if the Islamic Republic of Iran came in and imposed their will. Like they're not part of the citizenry.
No, absolutely not. No, this is a body unto itself, and they have their own rules, and they disrespect our Charter of Rights. I mean, I have so many charter violations. So the two big ones for the process is Section 7 and Section 11D, and that says that every citizen has a right to due process because it recognizes that the state has incredible power and they are not to abuse that power over citizens. So that makes sense, right? And I
Right.
brought this up. I've said, no, I am not getting due process. One of the things about Section 7 is you have a right to be heard. So they cannot muzzle you. They cannot say, no, we're not gonna allow this witness in, or that we're not gonna allow this testimony. And they do it all the time because they get away with it.
Who was it recently? They said they go into trial and on discovery they requested 12 witnesses. I think it was a nurse, Ontario Nurses Union, and all of their witnesses got struck down. They said they're not
Yeah.
experts, even though they were like vaccinologists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that happens all the time. I had a civil case, and so they said, okay, you need to provide an expert report from an expert. So and I did that on one occasion. So you go out and you pay $10,000 for someone who doesn't have a clue what they're talking about, but they will write an expert report and they can stamp it with their credentials. So they were asking for a report from a doctor and a psychiatrist. And this was my civil suit against the hospital and a psychiatrist. And I couldn't find anyone that would do it. Like, not my doctor and not my psychologist would do it. They refused. They said, no, we contacted our association and they won't let us do it. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to summon you as a witness then. You could write this report that would take you 45 minutes, or you can spend the whole day sitting in the courthouse waiting to be summoned. And they go, well, we don't have any choice. So I brought this into the court. They said you have to have expert reports. And I said, I can't find anyone to write it, but these people are intimately connected with my case. I will summon them as witnesses. And the judge goes, nope.
Why?
So he would be willing to accept a report from someone who had no knowledge of my case other than what I was telling him about it. Yet he disqualified two witnesses who were intimately involved with my case, because they know that this whole expert reporting system is so corrupt as well. It's a money generation scheme for a bunch of corrupt people that will write reports, and they will put whatever you want them to write for money.
Do you know Randy Hillier?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know him personally, but I know him of him very well. Yeah, yeah.
I was interviewing him and his daughter actually, and Randy was talking about the tribunals, and he said, there's no process, there's no procedure, and Chelsea, his daughter, jumped in. She goes, you know what? There is no justice in Canada. If you have millions of dollars, perhaps you could pursue it and get some remedy, but it's a pay to play system.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. So here's my strategy now. And I've been at this for 2.5 years now. So I know it's not going to be resolved at the Ontario Court of Justice, and probably not the Superior Court either. But when you get to the Court of Appeal, now you have a body of 3 judges who rule on the appeal. And now you've got a better chance that at least one of the judges is not corrupt. It's that bad. Now I have a 1 in 3 chance that they might not be corrupt. And they know that if I fail at the Court of Appeal, then I can go to the Supreme Court of Canada. And now, if it comes out that a Supreme Court judge is corrupt, that would be absolutely crushing to our justice system.
Do you think so though? Like I get the
Oh,
feeling that Canadians they're blissfully unaware. Like Mosley, not Mosley, Wagner said
yeah.
that the Freedom Convoy there was anarchy, they were targeting citizens, and he still hasn't recused himself despite the fact that they appealed the Mosley decision.
Yeah, yeah. No, and thank heavens for the Mosley decision. I mean, that was a real it really surprised me actually, but I mean that was enough, and I think the government is trying to appeal it at the Supreme Court, but they have to seek leave to appeal. So hopefully the Supreme Court will say no, 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 you're not wasting any more taxpayers' money on this garbage.
Man, I wonder what's going to happen. Like if they take it to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules against the Mosley decision, they say that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was lawful. Like, what's going to happen to the country? Like that, it's almost like Alberta separation will be guaranteed.
Oh yeah, and many many more ramifications for that. But you know, I seriously doubt that would happen because that case was so obvious and it's been through so many levels of court already, and they're very, very reticent of sticking their head above the parapet, shall we say. So I don't think there's any chance. I would be surprised if they even accepted the case at the Supreme Court. Because, like I say, the government now has to seek leave to appeal. So they have to seek permission from the Supreme Court to even have it heard. I don't think that's going to happen.
Let's go back to one thing you mentioned, contempt of court. Well, what is that?
So this is when your behavior is so egregious that now you are in contempt of the court. And I actually had a judge try and caution me on that, and I said, no, it goes back a little bit. So I said, Your Honor, could you explain to the court how you came to this conclusion? And he said, well, I am the court. And I said, well, Your Honor, my understanding is that the court is an institution, it's not a person. And he goes, you're walking a very fine line there, Mr. Ledsham. I said, well, I'm not in contempt of court because I put my life on the line for my country and its constitution and its charter of rights. I have enormous respect for the institution of the court. And he got what I was saying and he just moved on to something else. So I was basically saying I'm in contempt of him as a person.
I was going to say, it seems like the judges, a lot of them are in contempt of the court.
Well, and that's the thing, like who really is. So when you're not following the rules, that's the big thing. If you come in with a coffee and you're sitting down while you're talking to the judge because you have to stand up, to talk to the judge and all that kind of stuff. So they can find you in contempt of court because you're not respecting the rules of procedure of the court. Well, if the judge is not respecting them as well, you're absolutely right. It's the judge who's in contempt.
I think I'm leading the witness. I personally just don't have a very I don't have a very positive view of many of our institutions.
So let me tell you another story that will shock your audience. So on one of the times when I was arrested, I knew that there was a warrant for my arrest, and the warrant was what they call endorsed. So it says, okay, you have to arrest this person, but he is to be released immediately upon signing this recognizance, right? So you say, okay, I will not contact this person and blah 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 blah. So I knew that the warrant was endorsed for release. And I had to go to the police station to file some papers for an unrelated matter. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting and waiting. And then these two cops come out and they say, do you know there's a warrant for your arrest? And I said, yes, I do. I said, but it's endorsed for release. And they said, yes, yes, we agree. So then there's more waiting. They're contacting the Durham police who generated this warrant. And eventually they go, okay, the Durham police are not willing to have us process you, so we're going to drive you out to Durham. And I said, really? You're going to drive 2 hours out to Oshawa and then drive me back just so I can be released? And they go, well, that's the way it works. So I get out to Oshawa and they said, no, there's a new warrant and it's not endorsed. So you're going to go into the holding cells waiting bail. So I had to spend a night in these holding cells out in Oshawa, and it was in the middle of winter. I estimate that the temperature in the prison cell was probably about 17 degrees Celsius, and I'm wearing what I got here. I didn't have a parka or any of that. The bed is a slab of concrete. There is no food other than cereal bars. You can't even get water in there. They give you those juice boxes. And there were brown streaks on the wall. So I'm asking the prison guard. I said, "Well, what do you think those are?" Because they don't give you coffee, they don't give you chocolate, So what else could brown streaks be on the wall? Yeah. So this isn't just cruel and inhumane treatment. This is actual torture.
I think when you and I talked, you said that in the military they trained you how to resist torture.
Yeah, so we did training, because we knew that if we were in hostile territory, we got shot down, we would probably be captured and interrogated, right? So the training was called SERE, which is survival. So obviously, if you've been wounded, uh, and you've now ejected, so you have to tend to your wounds or whatever, stop yourself from bleeding to death. The next one is escape. No, sorry, evasion. So the next one is evasion, and that's to try and hide, to get away from capturing forces. The R stands for resistance, and that's resistance to interrogation. So you know that you're going to be tortured in one way or the other. All right. If they physically torture you, there's nothing you can do. But the most effective means of torture is sleep deprivation. So that's exactly what they did in prison. They left the lights on all night. It was cold, so I couldn't sleep. I didn't have a mattress, pillow, or blanket. I'm just lying on this concrete slab, and they would come by every 20 minutes and check on me, despite the fact that there was constant video surveillance on me. So they would come clomping down the hallway in their boots. So even if I could sleep, which I couldn't, it would wake me up. And sleep deprivation is a very effective means of torture. And they can keep you in there for, I think, 48 or 72 hours too. So if you went through that for a couple of nights, you would get in front of the justice of the peace at the end and say, "Okay, I plead guilty. I need to get out of here." Like, it's that bad.
Jen says this is insane. I'm sorry, Mr. Ledsham had to go through all of this. It is insane.
Yeah, it really is. But
Um,
I want to get the word out to people because, I was absolutely shocked. And if they can treat a guy like me that way, what about your average Joe or Jill on the street? And I met a lot of these people in the prisons and in the holding cells and that kind of stuff. And these are downtrodden people, and I mean, some of them had like 17 offenses of failure to appear, but they don't even have a cell phone, so how do they know when they're supposed to go to court? And it just keeps snowballing. And oh, here's another interesting thing. So I learned from someone who's deep into the system that the courts are funded based on the number of hearings and cases that they process. So the more hearings and cases that they process, the bigger piece of the funding pie that they get, because each of these courthouses is run like a little fiefdom, you know. So they get more funding, they get more judges, and the judges don't do very much, believe me. And like even an OCJ judge gets probably $250,000 a year, and I'm guessing they work probably 20 hours a week at the most.
yeah, I was thinking about this today. Um, Everything I've done, I haven't served like you, but everything I've done to help my country in the last 6 years, I've done for free. Like nobody
Yeah,
pays me. I
yeah.
work my ass off. And that goes for anyone who's in this movement to save their country.
Yeah.
Like the judges. I don't buy into this argument that they work harder than everyone else.
Oh,
Uh,
heavens no.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm biased. I don't like
So here's
our.
here's another thing. Um, so the military, we're paid by the taxpayers, so we are also public servants. And I mean, I had a very, very satisfying job as a fighter pilot, and I was very, very motivated to work. I didn't have to work 60 or 70 hours a week, but I loved it so much that I did it. Even when I was married with kids, it was like an addiction, right? But we didn't get overtime. You just got your salary, and I was making $95,000 a year when I retired. And these judges are making, 250, $400,000 for working a quarter of what I worked. And it's like, no, we're both public servants. You need to be accountable to the taxpayers.
No, it's well put. Alice brings up something. I'm going to go back to your story, but they did the
Yeah.
same thing to Artur Pavlovsky as well. Did you hear about this?
Oh yeah. He's a famous pastor. Yeah.
No, but did you hear what he had to go through when he was in jail?
Oh, I didn't hear the specifics. No.
It's somewhat similar to yours, but it's a little bit more extreme. Like they put him in like a maximum security prison with all the murderers.
No.
He thought they were going to kill him, and he called. You know, he had to smuggle out a message to his lawyer. It was just horrific. They kept moving him around from prison to prison.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm afraid of. So, like I said, I've been convicted twice, and then the last time, the Crown Attorney, I still haven't been sentenced on that one yet, but the Crown Attorney recommended 30 days in prison. And this was for a very, very minor administrative offense, right? So that's totally inappropriate. But I'm thinking they want to get me into prison and they're going to hire somebody to either beat me up or kill me. Because who knows what goes on inside those prisons, man. And I've had a couple of friends who've been unlawfully arrested and confined in prison, and they come out and they go, man, oh man, I never expected it to be that bad.
Well, you have
And
no
it's,
rights in there. You're not. You're
yeah,
subhuman.
yeah.
Which kind of brings me to the next question I had for you. You got, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but you got drugged against your will. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, so I had a big dispute with my neighbor. The police came by, and of course, they're asking me questions and they're not asking him questions. And I found out later on he's probably a paid informant for the police because they let him go. But they wanted me to back down, and I'm going, no, like I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you guys hassling me? So then they're bringing the mental health nurses, and they came I think 4 or 5 times. The last time they said, okay, we're apprehending you, and he brought out the handcuffs. So they put me in handcuffs. They took me to the hospital to the mental health ward, and I was quite upset about this, as you can imagine. And it's like being in prison. They take all of your stuff, they take your belt and all this kind of stuff, and they put me in a room. And I realized that the door wasn't locked in the room because there's no toilet in the room, right? So they have to let you go out and get to the toilet. So I go into the hallway, and the cops are still standing there. So I'm looking daggers at these guys, and then I start given a hassle to the nursing staff, and I said, why am I here? This is ridiculous. I haven't been assessed by a doctor or a psychiatrist. you know I've just been persecuted by the police. So these three mall cops came in, these security guards, and they threw me onto the gurney, and they held me down, and then two nurses came in and they injected me in each shoulder simultaneously. And then the nurse come in, and I said, okay, what just happened here? You didn't ask me if I was allergic to any of these injections, which you have to do. You did not give me informed consent, or you did not allow me informed consent. What did you inject me with? Because I had no idea. So she comes back with a little yellow sticky with hieroglyphics on what I was injected with. She wouldn't explain what they were. So this is an interesting story because um, I started feeling very woozy, and I'm thinking, I've got to record what happened here because I have no idea what they injected me with. And maybe tomorrow I'm going to wake up, with half my brain gone for all I knew. So I asked them for a pen and paper, and eventually they gave that to me. And I started writing everything that had happened. So if my memory was partially erased or whatever. And this sounds like conspiracy theory, but if you look up MK Ultra, I don't know if you've ever gone into that, the CIA thing back in the 60s and the 70s, but they actually burn people's brains out. So this stuff happens in Canada. Yeah. So anyway, I start writing it out, and I was able to keep this stuff. They didn't confiscate it from me, and I could see that my writing was deteriorating, as I was losing my mental acuity, and I kept that. Well, we did the same thing in the military, so we had to do what's called a hypoxia chamber, where they take you to a low pressure environment, as if you're up at 30,000 feet, and then you take off your oxygen mask, and you have all these tasks to do, and you can see your ability trailing off. So you can see how you're writing. You just cannot write legibly. And it was exactly the same thing. So I researched what they'd injected me with. One was a sedative, and I was so hyped up on adrenaline, it took me about 3 hours until I just couldn't stay awake anymore. But 3 hours, fighting the sedative. And the other one was an antipsychotic, and that's what ruined my mental acuity.
World says that MK Ultra was happening in Montreal for years. I think
Yeah,
it's happening in BC right now. We just call it the BC Mental Health Act.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
there was
But
a gentleman.
MK Ultra
You,
was really, really bad. Like they would give electroshock therapy, hallucinogenics, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Alice Notwoke says it's still happening. It's called the CBC.
Yeah, yeah, you're ruining my mind.
Now, I was going to say a Mel Boucher. So I'm just going to throw out some names. Mel Boucher, they take him in under the BC Mental Health Act. They drug him. The guy's lobotomized. I've seen him. Like he's
Oh,
slurring his words.
yeah. Well, so I think we might have discussed this, but um, most people have seen the movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson,
Yeah.
and when they finally get him, and then he comes back into the ward the second time. So he gets the treatment the first time, and he's pretending that he's all screwed up, and then he goes, but the second time they got him, and I'm sitting there thinking, am I going to wake up in the morning with lobotomy scars? It was that bad. I like, this is the first time I seriously prayed to God and said, get me through this, please.
It's really terrifying. Like the last 6 years, we're all screaming about informed consent. Like
Oh,
you can't force us to take the vaccine.
yeah.
Meanwhile, no one's looking at these mental health acts where they're taking people. In your case,
Yeah,
they hit you with this drug, and you're like, wait a minute, you can't
yeah,
do that. It's a
yeah.
violation of the security of your person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. But they get away with it. That's the thing, and it's all happening behind closed doors. So, then I have to. So I'm suing the hospital and the doctor and the psychiatrist and all this kind of stuff. So I have to serve them with summons again. So I go to the hospital. They can't find these people. I can't serve them in person. They don't know where they are and all this kind of stuff. So I said, okay, I'm going to go up to the hospital CEO's office. So I go up and I get to the third floor, but you can't get to the fourth floor unless they have a magnetic swipe card, right? So I go, okay, here we go. So I go back down to the third floor, and there's the foundation, the hospital foundation, which is where they get donations from naive people that think they should give hospitals their money. So I go in there, and there's a very nice woman sitting there, and I say, hey, I'm trying to get up to see the CEO, and I'm wearing the same stuff, right? So I look pretty respectable. I said, I can't get in there. Is there any way I can take the stairs or whatever? And she goes, oh, no, no, I'll just flash you on my card and you can get up there. So I get up to the fourth floor, and I'm walking down the hall, and I see this guy come out of the washroom, and he's wearing a golf shirt and jeans, and he goes into the CEO's office. So I follow him in, and I said, oh, excuse me, sir, are you the CEO? And he goes, yeah. He says, oh, okay, well, I have some summons to witness for some of your employees. And he goes, oh, well, you can get my assistant to hand this out. Well, this guy makes $450,000 as a hospital CEO, and he's not a medically trained person. He's an administration guy, right? So then I go through the same routine with the assistant. She can't find these people. She doesn't know when they're on shift, all this kind of stuff. So the CEO eventually comes back out, for something else. And I said, listen, this is not helping. I'm wasting my time here. I want to give these to you, and then you can give them to your employees. And he goes, well, the doctors aren't employees, they're contract workers. So I said, but you're responsible for them. They may not work for the hospital, but you pay the contracting agency, which then pays them, right? And he goes, well, I don't know. I don't know how the payment system works. And it's like, you make $450,000 and you don't even know how you're paying your doctors. It was just bizarre. Yeah. So, so this nurse, and I'll get back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But if you've seen the head nurse on that movie, her name was Nurse Ratchet. And the one in the psych ward in Burlington, she was just like Nurse Ratchet, like just a real bitch. So anyway, I'm trying to serve her, and eventually the CEO admits that yes, she is a hospital employee, so he would accept service from her. So it goes to the lawyers, and I only had her first name. I couldn't find out what her last name was. So it goes to the lawyers, and the lawyers say, "Well, we don't know who this nurse, whatever her name was, Jane is. So we can't, we can't process her defense. You're on your own." So I go back to the hospital and I go, "Okay, listen, this is BS." And the lawyers still persisted on that. Well, a year later, they filed their response to my civil claim, and they're calling her as a witness. So I said, "Oh, you couldn't find her to summon, but you can call her as a witness? Like, are you people stupid?" And there's a lot of lawyers who are not very smart, believe me. And they worked for a big company too. This is Bordner, Ladner, Gervais.
Let me ask you a question. A lot of the people that I've talked to that have self-represented, they reported just getting bounced around. Like they go to the judge and the judge says, no, you can't do this. You got to go to this other jurisdiction. They go file 6 months later. The judge is like, nope, you got to go back to the original one. You go back to the original one. They're like, oh, you have to start with the ombudsman. So they're
Yeah.
just bouncing you around.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they know, and it's a Byzantine system, on purpose. They want to get people so tied up in the system that they just give up.
What
So
I always
there's
wonder.
another thing. Here's another thing. The Ontario criminal justice system has a 200,000 case backlog that's been there since COVID in 2019. And they still have this 200,000 case backlog, and they're obliged to settle cases within 18 months. So there's probably a lot of really nasty criminals who have just been released from the system because the court cannot process it in time. And yet, here's somebody like me. I've been there for 2.5 years, so well beyond the
I was
18
going to
months
ask you
limit.
about that. You said you brought this up with the judge, and that you're like, you have to process me in 18 months, and the judge is like, yeah, whatever, I don't care.
No, so what they do is they try and attribute the delay to the defendant. So they'll say, well, Major Ledsham asked for this adjournment and that adjournment, and he had an issue with his mother and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, not even close. Not even close. Yeah. And
What if
that
it's
it's
one of
it's a
those?
hard limit. Like that's actually it's under section 11B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It says it has to be adjudicated in 18 months. The trial has to be complete in 18 months. And I'm already at probably 26.
I was interviewing this guy. We were talking about the U.S. Bill of Rights, and it says blah blah blah. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And the guy turns to me. He's like, "What part of shall not do these lawyers not understand?" it's like
Yeah,
it's like
it's
clear as
pretty
day. It's
clear.
18 months. But
Yeah.
but how does the judge, in good conscience, violate that?
Well, it's like I said, and once again, it's not up to the judge to argue it, but he should adjudicate it. He should say the Crown arguments about defense delay are not credible. So I have the judicial discretion and responsibility to now vacate this trial.
But
So
they
it's his
never did.
responsibility to do that. That he should have done that. So what they're trying to do now is, they've kicked this can down the road, I think, because they realize that they don't have a case. But now they've got 5 other ancillary charges against me for failure to comply and failure to appear and all that kind of stuff. And they've been pushing through those as quickly as possible. So that means every case that comes up that I get convicted on, I now have to appeal. So I think they realize that they don't have the core case. And if I had have been found not guilty on the core case, then all of these ancillary cases would have been moot because I would have had no reason to contact these people or reason to appear in court, which they said I failed to appear. And one of them was for appearing on Zoom instead of appearing in person. So the judge said, "Well, you failed to appear," and I said, "No, I appeared via Zoom, and that is a perfectly acceptable means of appearing in court." I said, "I realized that I wasn't given permission by you to appear virtually, but I did, in fact, appear." But they still proceeded with the charges.
This is just maddening. It's like Kafka-esque.
Yes, yeah, that's a very good way of describing it. Yeah. Yeah.
No, this is just. I don't know how you put up with that. I've dealt with some limited lawfare, but mostly in civil court. But
Yeah.
this is just some advice my dad gave me when we first immigrated to Canada. I was a kid. He goes, "Payman, this country, the Canada is heaven as long as you don't break the law. If you get in trouble with the law, this place is hell."
He knew that already.
Yeah. It's like we shouldn't even have a justice system at this point. Just throw people in jail for life. Like you get screwed so badly.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, I hope this will wake some people up, and I hope people will share this video and raise the awareness, because I'm sure. I mean, I don't know how many stories you've got, but I bet you there are thousands and thousands of stories similar to this, and people get to the position where they're just too afraid to talk about it. So.
What surprises me is that there's so many people out there like you who it's self-sacrifice. I mean, you could have just like I don't know settled and then gone back to I don't know your simple life. But there are people that pursue this because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and like I had a great career, both as a fighter pilot and then as an airline pilot. I enjoyed it. So it's I think I have sort of a moral obligation now, and it's like I said, I have so much legal experience, and um, like I have integrity, and we in the military we counted on each other to survive. So if there was ever any question about integrity, you would be kicked off the squadron in a second. So I know that. I'm not bragging about my integrity, but these are the kind of things you have to do. And it's the old thing about when you wake up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror, who are you? If you're not willing to take some risks in life, then, you're going to live a very boring life.
It's a good question from Alice. So where exactly are you in your case, or are there new charges every time you speak out?
No, so there's no new charges, and there's another really pathetic incident. So I had to report every other week for bail, and I had to go all the way out to Oshawa. So it's 2.5 hours each way to get out there. So I had to go to the police station and report for bail. So I did it the first time on the 15th of July. This is a couple of years ago. And then I was going to drive out to see my mother, who lives in Nova Scotia. But we were leaving on the Thursday, I think. No, sorry, when was it? No, we were leaving on Friday, but the Friday before the 2-week Tuesday. So I report on Friday. So now I'm 10 days instead of 14 days. And I'm talking to the civilian, that works in the police station that you report to. And she goes, "Well, no, you're supposed to be here next Tuesday." And I said, "Well, I understand that." I said, "But I'm leaving today to drive out to Nova Scotia, so I won't be able to go there." So she goes and gets this stupid cop, with steroid infested biceps and tattoos and stuff. And he goes, "No," he says, "you gotta come back here on Tuesday." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." He goes, "No, no, you have to be here on Tuesday. That's your bail reporting period." And I said, "No, it's not. You don't understand how this works, constable." You know, so they actually arrested me in the courthouse for failure to appear for bail. And I've been there 10 days and then 14 days and then 14 days. So I asked the judge, I said, I didn't tell him exactly what had happened, but I said, "What is your interpretation of this, Your Honor?" And he goes, "Well," he says, "it's every other week. So, I mean, you could go, Monday on one week, and then, the Friday 2 weeks later type of thing." I said, "Well, if I went 10 days after the initial appearance," he goes, "Well, that's no problem, obviously." So these cops are so stupid that they actually thought that I had broken my bail requirements, and they arrested me and they put me
Okay,
back
hold
in
on.
this. Well,
Your bail requirements say that every 14 days you have to go report?
it's not even that. It's every other week. Yeah. So it's any time within the 14 days.
Right, but so what's wrong? And you were gone for 14 days or what?
No, so the first time I showed up early. So I showed
Okay.
up after 10 days because I was going to be away, in Nova Scotia for the 14-day one. But there's nothing wrong with going early. You're still respecting the limits of there. But they
But what
actually
was
arrested me for that. It's not like, "Hey, this is wrong." They actually arrested me for it and put me back in the holding cells.
okay, hold on. I'm struggling to understand this. They arrested you because you showed up early?
Yeah, yeah. They said, well, so what happened was they didn't enter it as me appearing for bail. So they said, "Okay, that's called failure to appear." He did not appear on the 25th of July. And I said, "Yes, I did." and I know everybody's name and their badge number or their employee number, and I will call them as witnesses.
So instead of showing up on the 25th of July, you showed up like on the 23rd.
Yeah, so I was supposed to be there on the 29th, and I showed up on the 25th. Yeah. So it's
Okay, and then
early. Yeah.
they said that you didn't show up on the 29th.
Yeah, because they didn't log my appearance, because they said, no, you have to be here on the 29th. You can't show up on the 25th. So they just didn't log it in the system. So it shows that I didn't show up. And I'm looking up at all the, the CCTV cameras and that kind of stuff. I'm going, this is not going to end well for you. So
Man,
it took
this
me a lot. Like, I finally got the Crown to drop the charges, and I had to contact the Crown. I said, "Hey, are you involved in this conspiracy as well? Because I will charge you. You're not immune from criminal charges. You better make this go away." And eventually he did. But that's the only case that
yeah.
they've.
Do you remember the ArriveCan app?
Oh yeah, yeah,
So during COVID, there was this video that went viral. This gentleman traveling with his daughter or granddaughter. He must be like 85. And they asked him that they're like, "Where's this guy's ArriveCan app?" And the daughter's like, "He doesn't have a phone." And they're like,
yeah.
"Well, he can't enter the country without a phone." And he's like, "I'm a Canadian citizen."
Yeah,
And,
you
and
can't order me to have a phone.
and then the guy turned to his daughter, and the daughter was arguing with him. He said, Don't bother. This is bureaucracy run amok. Like, this is what this
Yeah.
is. They
Oh
didn't have to arrest you for showing up 4 days early, but
yeah,
they did anyway. Like,
oh yeah, yeah.
what's going on? This is no longer, these institutions aren't there to protect us. They're just out of control.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. So I don't know what the answer is. You asked me earlier what I thought, and I mean, well, first of all, I thought that the Durham Region Police Service was just so incredibly corrupt that it needed to be shut down at the higher levels and, under new management by the OPP until they found some reasonable people. But then, I saw the same thing in Durham or in Halton. And then I don't know if you've heard about the huge corruption scandal in Toronto and York region with the, guys, police officers selling information to local gangs about doing hits on jail guards, and that's only just
Yeah.
beginning. That's going to go on forever. So there's a huge problem in our justice system. Yeah.
I interviewed a gentleman, Luke Sabarin,
Yeah.
with the CBSA, and he pointed out the same thing. Like, he's dealing with organized crime, and then he got cornered by this guy that got released, organized crime, and they didn't even warn him that this guy's out. Be careful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he said that he almost got murdered, and then something spooked the guy, and he ran away.
Yeah. 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 No, it's and the chances of getting a permit to carry a concealed firearm are, you know absolutely microscopical. Virtually no chance of being able to carry a firearm. So, even when you know that you're targeted, how do you protect yourself?
This is Mr. Milosh, Andre Milosh. He ran with me for the People's Party last election. He
Hmm.
says the abuse of power by petty bureaucrats is an intrinsic characteristic of fascism. He's a big philosopher, and we talk about the stuff. I was only doing my job.
Yeah, 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 and of course that fails on the Nuremberg test. So in the military, we were this was really ingrained in us, because we were in single seat fighter airplanes and we carried a lot of firepower. And they said, if someone tells you to do something, to drop your bomb on something that you feel might be a mosque or a hospital or whatever, you are obliged to um, disregard that order because that's an unlawful order. And if it's coming from a general or something, that's a pretty serious thing to do. But it's not that you should do it; you're obliged to do it. So, the Nuremberg trial set that principle because the Nazis were saying, well, we were just following orders, and they said, no, no, you knew what you were doing. You were not just killing but torturing these people. It was your job to disregard that order.
Earlier I asked whether you got bounced around from department to department, and I find Canadians, bureaucrats in Canada, they do mental gymnastics to not say I was just doing my job. They say it
Yeah,
in a different way. Not my
yeah,
responsibility. You have
Yeah.
to deal with that other department. It's a different branch of the executive. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, they've created it in such a way that everyone just does their job. It's like, like let's say you and I are departments, we want to kill somebody. Like I stab the knife in, you come in, you stab the knife out, and you're like, well, neither of us really did the full job.
Yeah. But I even run into that with judges, like I'll say, well, you know, for instance, when I told the judge about the conditions in the jail cell, and he said, well, that's not my jurisdiction. And I said, well, it's
There you go.
absolutely your jurisdiction. It's absolutely your jurisdiction. I said, you have incredible judicial discretion. You are allowed to issue warrants. You are allowed to instigate investigations. And I said, I've been in the holding cells in the basement of this court. So while we're on recess, why don't you and I go down there and have a look, and I can show you exactly how it is. And he goes, no, 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 I'm not going to do that, because he knew, right? Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Law and Order, like the TV show. Growing up, I used to watch it. And the judges, they don't even have to do anything. They just have to make a statement. Like all you have to say is to the Crown prosecutor, like, your actions here have been abhorrent. If I could, I'd throw you in jail for life, but I can't. Something like that would be symbolic. They don't
Yeah.
even do that.
No, no, it's all a big club. Yeah.
No. Even for that, I'm guessing they would have some reason. They'd be like, well, it would violate our rule of ethics. Like they have no ethical issues when it comes to, your rights are being trampled. But when it comes to the executive branch or the government in general, they support each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody who's watching this episode, they can pretty much tell what my views are on integrity in our government.
Well, and you and I talked about it offline, but the other thing, we should probably wrap this up pretty soon here, but I actually tried to run as a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, and I couldn't even get in the door. You know, they shut me down. So I did support the candidate that ran here in Burlington, and I was a little bit opinionated at some of the meetings because I was on the electoral district association, so the board for that particular district, and the president of the electoral district, she actually said in public that I'm a red Tory. Speaking of herself, not me. Yeah. And I said, well, what does that mean? We're supposed to be conservatives here. There shouldn't be any question about which side you're on. And then they kicked me out too. And it was the same thing, they had an arbitrator in there, and it was a Zoom meeting. So when I tried to argue my case, he would put me on mute. And it's like, I've seen this episode before, dude.
That's never fun.
Yeah.
Tony, let's end it on an easy note. Clown World asks, Mr. Ledsham, as a pilot, have you ever seen the curvature of the Earth?
No, so I've been up about 55,000 feet, but I think you have to get up to about 80,000 to see the curvature of the Earth. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's a big ball. And 50,000 feet is not very high, really.
What do commercial airlines fly at?
Normally in the high 30s. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And then the Concorde used to go up pretty high. I think it went up to about 60,000 or so. Yeah.
well, you never know. One day, maybe you'll get up that high.
Yeah. Well, here's another little factoid, and this scared the crap out of me. So above 48,000 feet, if you lose pressurization, if the canopy blows off or something like that, your blood starts to boil because of the pressurization difference, and that'll kill you.
Really?
Yeah, it'll kill you in a matter of seconds. So
Your
that's
blood
why.
boils?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's why above 48,000 feet, you have to wear a full astronaut suit, a fully pressurized suit, and we didn't have those in Canada. So
Oh,
so
wow.
we were limited to 48,000 feet, but sometimes you kind of sneak up a little higher just to have a look to see if you can
Right.
see that curvature.
Tony, this is why I prefer to drive. That's why I don't fly.
Yeah, you're in this little aluminum tube, and when you realize what's out there, it's scary.
Well, Tony, I guess we can end it there. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope people share this episode, and we can get your message out there.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Peyman.
All right, take care.
Bye bye.